In a strategic committee meeting, touch wood for the trimester. Been a pleasure to chair you for the last couple of years, and I hope that continues today. Kia ora, Charlie. Good morning. G'day, Charlie. Yes, so welcome. Just a short reminder, I'm going to read something that I read as I came into the chamber. And it says, campaigning and electioneering are not allowed in the council chambers or on council property. Thank you. So I hope we don't test that today. I anticipate we might come close, but let's just remember this is not campaigning, okay?
Live to ear.
So look, with that welcome, can I ask, Charlie, now you're settled, to lead us in the karakia?
Well, let's do Tū Taua Mai. Karakia tātou. Tū Taua Mai I runga. Tū Taua Mai I raro. Tū Taua Mai I roto. Tū Taua Mai I waho.
Kia tau ai te mauritu, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, hauni e, hui e, tai ki e.
Kia ora. So look, on to housekeeping. This meeting is being live streamed on the council's Facebook page and recorded for viewing at a later date on a YouTube channel. An earthquake, drop, cover and hold. If the shaking's long and strong, get gone. When the shaking subsides, we all know that we go through the building and we head up to Tiffin Park. Evacuation, if the emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building. We go out the nearest exit and go onto the grass. The assembly area emergency exits are clearly signposted. Paripaku down the hallway. Do I have any conflict of interest declarations today? None, thank you. And just apologies. We have apologies from Councillor Williams. Any other apologies to note? No. Okay. Can I have a mover for the apologies? Thank you, Councillor McIntosh. In a second, Councillor Sears. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against. Carried. Thank you very much. Right. So right into it. Confirmation of the minutes of the 21st of May. Does anyone have any concerns with the minutes? Give you a moment just to catch up with them. If there are none, a mover and a seconder for the minutes. Councillor McIntosh. Oh, and I think we had Laura. I saw 2 fingers up there. Peace be with you, my friend. So all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against. Carried. Right, so that's done. Moving on to public forum. We've had no notifications of interest in speaking, so there is no public forum today. So we can move on to our one and only decision item for this meeting in public, at least today.
Chair, so I've got Megan up with me, and really just I'll highlight a few key points. I'm aware that there's a number of questions, so we might focus on the questions. Sure. So this is very much a paper that came from the omnibus paper at the last council meeting around changes in the financial year, and it's effectively around the release of funds from an operational reserve. So what is an operational reserve? For each of our schemes that has a targeted rate, we have an operational reserve that basically sets the long-term average maintenance costs for those schemes. Every year there will be unders and overs, and those unders and overs are funded through the operational reserve. What happens when money goes into the reserve? It's 70% targeted rated and 30% general. The 30% general is stripped out and goes into general funds for the end of financial year. The 70% targeted rate goes into that operational reserve. Then when we want to use that operational reserve, we take the 70% out of the operational reserve. We add back in the 30% general rate from the general rate component of that year, and we use it to average out costs over time. So in this particular instance, we put up a budget to respond to the independent flood review recommendations, and we set aside 1.7 million for a variety of projects there, of which 700,000 was set aside for reimagining flood resilience. And so that's for project management, engagement, processes with the public, and some other bits and pieces. There's some attendance and participation costs, some comms and engagement support. And what we were thinking at the time, the context at the time when we were first putting these numbers together was we had a lot of pressure on the general rate. We found $5 million worth of operational savings. We were estimating what we thought it would cost to run these projects, and we put up that 1.7, which was funded through the Safe Carbon, if you recall. And at the time, we were thinking that we would leverage some of the funding left out of the NIWI scheme reviews. So that was the thinking at the time. All those reviews are now being worked on and will be completed at the end of the calendar year. They were tested in the market through a competitive process, and they are fixed price pieces of work for all of our schemes. So what's transpired is there's very little contingency left in that NIWI fund. It's extremely small, and in fact that contingency belongs to NIFCO through NIFCO processes to release that contingency, but it's insufficient to fund this. We felt it was very important that when we engage the community and our partners and listen to their contributions to how flood resilience can be achieved, that we might want to test some of those ideas in a technical perspective. So this money would fund the detailed assessment of some of those ideas in addition to the sort of starter for 10 work that we have already completed. And I think it's quite important we can reflect back and test some of those community ideas. So that's probably a broad scope of the purpose of the funds, where the funds are coming from, why we appear to now have a shortfall, and I'm happy to probably go through and answer any questions, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chris. Look, and just to kick off, I'd say that one of the things that councillors probably struggle with is understanding how $3 million can disappear but be consumed in these scheme review processes. And so, you know, a little bit more insight on that would probably be helpful if there's any shorthand way that you could describe it. I know you've already described that.
So I think one important concept is that NIWI funding for scheme reviews was not to solely fund Heretaunga and Upper Tuki schemes. We've got 26 schemes in total. All of those schemes are being reviewed. So if you simply look at those numbers, $100,000 per scheme for a scheme review comes to sort of $3 million. And the big schemes are technically challenging. We've had to, there's probably a lot more detail that's gone into a lot of the technical assessment because we're now using post-Gabriel statistics. So a lot of there's a lot of changes to some of our assumptions around peak flows. And so that's effectively how that money is consumed. If you were thinking we've spent that 3 + 1 on 2 scheme reviews, that's not the case. It's reviewing every single scheme. And it's also producing new hazard layers for each of those schemes as well. So, for example, the new hazard layer for Esk and Tangawhal Valley is being funded out of that scheme review. So, seems like a lot of money, but when you actually look at the number of schemes it applies to, you can see where the money goes. It certainly doesn't disappear. It's valuable money to give this council insight as to the performance of our schemes, the likely impacts of climate change, and what provisions we should put in our 30-year infrastructure plan to signal the direction of investment or not in infrastructure.
Thank you. Open for questions. Councillor Sears.
I know Councillor Curtin's got a bit more detail, but just to really understand 10 and 10.1,
the original $4 million set aside for the scheme reviews, the 3 million from Niue and the million of general
Yep.
rates, then 10.1. 1 million's already been spent on Hiratonga and Upper Tukitok.
Correct.
That's out of that first 4 million. That was the 1 million was the scheme review part that we've already done for those two schemes.
I believe so, yes.
And then the other remaining 3 million of that has been spread over the other 25 schemes so far. All
Correct.
completed and all
Getting
utilised.
to the end of completion, yeah.
of
Actively
those
being worked on. So we've committed the funds through fixed price contracts with, I think there's 3 separate consultants working on 3 separate packages.
And through you, Chair, so that million, the first pieces of work done on those two schemes, which we've seen are the basis for the first discussion on where we might go with the reimagining.
That's correct.
The next pieces of work will be discrete as to could this be an opportunity, could that? Yes, understood.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, go to the screen and Laura, you've got a question.
Oh, kia ora. Sophie alluded to my question, but this 500,000, will it specifically be spent for the Tukituki and Hiratonga reimagining scheme, or is it going to be spread across to complete all of the schemes?
So to be really clear, that 500K is specifically for reimagining Hiratonga and Upper Tukituki schemes. So that's the budget request today, just for those 2 schemes, and it's to tie in with our engagement process to ensure that we can feed back the merit or not of different ideas that may come forward.
Councillor Curtin.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Chris, I just want to take you to paragraph 10 of the paper. We just need a significant level of clarity about what's happened and what you're planning on happening. Here, originally, there was an assumption that 4 million set aside for scheme reviews, 3 million from Niue, 1 million from general rates. However, this funding has now been fully utilised. I go back, it's hard to try and look back and see where we came from, but the projects that were heralded in the 3-year plan, the 24-27 plan, they say that the year 1 and 2, 24-26, last year and the current year, recovery funding allocation 3 million, split 2.25 government from Niue and HBRC 0.75. So I'm trying to understand where you get to 4 million, and how much have you spent so far in 2022? The last financial year, and how much are you expected to spend in the current year? You've flagged 700,000 in this table, plus 0.5, so you're talking 1.2 million. So I'm trying to unravel how you get from our last year's long-term plan document. You're saying you've spent 1 million. You're saying the funding has been fully utilised. So what did you spend last year, and what are you planning on spending this year?
So to make it really easy, I think we've spent circa 1 million on Upper Tukituki and Hiratonga, and we've committed almost 3 million with contingency through contracts that were let probably last financial year and will be completed this financial year. So I can get the exact splits for you out of the IPMO Niue program, but they've been presented in various reports. But that's effectively, it's a commitment. It's a little bit tricky when you look at the annual plan, because when I talk 3 million in this paper, I'm talking 3 million in total, which is both the Crown and the Regional Council contribution to that 3 million number. But effectively, we've spent 1 million and we've committed 3 million, so that 4 million is committed and not available for further modelling work for reimagining. And that was an assumption the team made when these numbers were been first put together, and that assumption has not, funding has not been available as we thought may be available. And that's effectively the pricing from the market has come back fully utilised that funding envelope.
I'm still troubled, Chris, how we go from the 3 million in the long-term plan. You're now saying it's 4 million, and you've already spent 1 million. And then you're asking.
I don't believe I've said that. No.
There were an assumption that 4 million is set aside for the scheme reviews, 3 million from NIWA, 1 million from general rates. However, the FAT funding has now been fully utilised.
Yep, correct. That's what I've just said.
All the 4 million.
That's correct. So it's committed through a number of contracts.
So how did we get from 3 million in the plan to 4 million in this paper?
In the annual plan for 23-24, in the cyclone rate, there was $1 million for scheme reviews. So
Say again?
in the annual plan for 23-24, there was $1 million allocated for scheme reviews. So it's the 3 million from NIWI plus that additional $1 million from general rates.
Can you direct me to where it says in the plan that $1 million was allocated for?
In the annual plan?
In the annual plan.
In the annual plan.
Sorry, is the current year's annual plan you're saying?
No, in the 23-24.
Previous year's annual plan.
Previous. So Chair, can I?
Sure, yep.
So we had 23-24, there was 1 million, and then 24 to 26, there's another 3 million. So that was the total of 4. So there's $1 million before the 3-year plan. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you tell me, perhaps offline, where in the annual plan that $1 million sits? Because I can't find it.
We can show you.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Coming back, Mr. Chair, Chris, the level. I'm still troubled by what has been spent last year and what you're planning to spend this year. So I'm needing to see last year's numbers, budget versus actual, and this year's number, budget versus actual spent today.
For what project, councillor?
Well, for the scheme review, what are you calling it here? The scheme review, was it an assumption? So the scheme review and this extra work.
So the scheme reviews comes through the NIWI reporting, so I'm happy to provide a copy of the NIWI reporting. In terms of this reimagining, there was no budget last financial year because the budget was provisioned for this financial year. However, we spent a total of $332,000, which is effectively labour costs and consultancy costs funded out of special projects in asset management, and that was done with a view to get the project going at pace and not wait for the new financial year. For this financial year, the budget is obviously $700K, and we've spent to date
90.
about 90. So that would be those ones. So I'm looking at the totals. Yep. So just bringing out reimagining, we spent about 90,000, and then we would also have a number of commitments, and so we've got substantially more committed funding in the terms of contracts that have been let. We can provide a table of those costs.
Yeah, I'm looking at the table out of the plan, and it says scheme reviews to configure and build resilience. So those two activities, if you like,
Yep.
they're intimately linked.
Correct.
They were linked in the long-term plan,
Yep.
and then a budget figure has been allocated of 3 million. So I'm still at a loss as to where we've come from, what was spent, and where we're going, and what that looks like. So two parts.
So the crux of it is there was an assumption that we could do some further work out of that NIWI funding, scheme review work to support reimagining. Once we had let all of those fixed price contracts with appropriate contingency required by NIFCO, that assumption did not bear out as true. And so in the interests of proceeding with the project, we are here today requesting that we release $500,000 of money that has already been collected from ratepayers, is sitting in an operational reserve, and we release that money for this purpose so we can undertake our reimagining project that will set our infrastructure strategy up for the next 30 years. So that's That's the crux of it. There was an assumption, so that was my assumption. That assumption didn't bear out due to, as costs came in. There was a context of cost saving. We took 5 million out of the operating budget. We funded this work through selling carbon credits. So we were trying to keep costs as low as we thought were practicable, and we weren't perfect.
Thank you, Chris. Look, I think what you've done is provided a lot more clarity about the alignment with the annual plan. So I've been satisfied by what I've heard there. What I've also heard is that there's a lot, you've actually committed more than you spent, but we're fully committed. And there's a level of detail there we can dive into in another forum, and we can follow that up. But I think we've kind of rounded that bit of the discussion out now. I'll go to Councillor McIntosh and then Councillor Foley. Thank you.
Look, I think it's a brief one, but the extra $500,000 is to accommodate feedback you've got from the process. And how do you determine what's worth a look at and what's not?
Yeah.
I'm sort of driving to the point of we're not just doing stuff to keep people happy, we're doing stuff that we know is a reasonable prospect of being successful.
So that's a very good question. So we're already, with that $500,000, we are not in a position to do detailed analysis of every idea because we understand that we need to prioritise how we fund that. So there will be a filtering process around what has merit and what doesn't. And there'll be a basic technical process to filter that through. And we haven't designed exactly what that process looks like, but we know that that process needs to exist. So we're certainly not in the realm of looking at 40 separate options that come up. We'll allow those options to come up. They will need to be assessed as to those that may have merit, and then the ones that may have merit would go through a more technical process. So that's sort of how we envisage the process working. That could lead to some disappointment from some community groups who have ideas about how to deliver flood resilience, but they need to have technical merit to progress through that process. We would also use it sparingly to demonstrate that some ideas don't work, because once again, taking people on that journey about what's meritorious and what's not.
Councillor Foley.
Thanks, Chair. Just based on all that line of questioning, just want to be clear. So the paper is about an extra $500,000 on the Reimagining Flood Resilient project. It's not actually to do with the scheme reviews and all the money that's sort of work being done and it's been spent. But today is on primarily the Reimagining Flood Resilience project. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's a terminology thing. Reimagining is a scheme review for Heretaunga, but I can be clear that this funding is for the Reimagining project for Heretaunga and Upper Tukituki. It is not to be on other schemes.
Yeah, so we started at a figure of 700,000 for that project.
Yep.
So we're now looking at 1.2 to do this consultation project. I'm wondering if my definition of community is different to yours. Can you reassure me that throughout this whole process, we are going to the community where everyone is getting their chance to have a say, which is basically the recommendation that came out of the independent flood review?
So what I can describe as the papers that have been brought before you is it is around creating a stakeholder reference group and focus groups. So in one sense, we won't be consulting with the entire community. So we have different mechanisms. We have a survey type mechanism where anyone in the community can provide input. But we are creating our stakeholder reference groups that would be representative of the community. And we have our steering committees, which involves our PSG partners and councillors to have oversight of those stakeholder reference groups. And we also have focus groups. So if there's specific people or specific functions or specific infrastructure owners that want to integrate, we can do that through a focus group. So those stakeholder reference groups are being advertised, I think, from today, and there'll be a process over the next couple of weeks or three or 4 weeks to determine those, and I think we are looking for around 60 people to be on those stakeholder reference groups. So that gives you probably a guide as to how the representation may work. And then, of course, there's full public consultation in the 2027 LTP, where we would consult, I imagine, we would consult on the topic of flood resilience, and everybody in the community would have an opportunity to respond to the plan that's been created through this process.
Councillor Ormsby.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chris. Just for clarification, in terms of the operational reserve budget, this is where the $500,000 is requesting to come from, and you say we've already accumulated that.
Correct.
So what would be missed usually, because this is a one-off ask, I guess, for a special project that we're all invested in, but what will miss out from that budget from this ask?
So potential things that may miss out. So basically what we're using here is probably our capital accumulation for capital projects. So back in 2016, this council consulted on its level of service for flood resilience, and that's where it decided to go to a 1 in 500 year level of service. And it funded that through a $1 million, effectively $1 million rating from the Heretaunga scheme. And that was held over. So that wasn't a new rate, but it was a rate holdover from the sawfly rate that was generated when they had a sawfly issue on the edge protection. So that money has been coming in, and what have we spent it on so far? So, for example, it was our contribution to the IRG, our co-funding contribution to IRG in Heretaunga. So we had a $20 million investment in Heretaunga. We provided 40%. That's the sort of money. So what we're trying to do here is set up the future investments. So to me, it's quite an appropriate use of that money, because we're not spending it on other things. We're actually spending it on the planning work that will generate the specific projects that we'll need to invest in, and then continue that reserve will continue to build up. So I think it's totally appropriate. At the moment, we have paused investment in Heretaunga because we had a plan to build everything to 1 in 500, which was effectively to build everything taller. Post Gabriel, we've recognised that we need to understand how the scheme works in over-design events. So we're redoing our planning, and from that we'll have a new set of projects to execute. So I think nothing is really missing out, but it's totally appropriate. It's a totally appropriate investment.
Just, sorry, secondary, please, Chair. So with the 500,000, if that's approved today, can we have some guarantees that there won't be another ask after that?
So there won't be a guarantee. What I will say is we will treat the money as our own. We will use competitive processes where available, acknowledging that Tonkin and Taylor have already done that model, and we'll be managing that money very closely. But I can't provide an ironclad guarantee. There's always uncertainty within projects, but I can give you the guarantee that we'll treat the money as our own, and we'll carefully manage that money through the project.
Yeah.
Okay, seems there are no more questions, so we can move on to the recommendations. And
One, if I could ask.
yes.
I'd asked for some some information around the budgets of those. Is that available at the moment, or when's that becoming available?
So we did ask for so I have some information that we can send you, which is the detailed budget breakdown for the reimagining project into there's 5 different categories within that project. We're happy to send that through. It's quite detailed in terms of how we've structured the project.
Is that looking forward? That is what we're going to do versus, there are 2 tranches I'm looking for, what we have done and what we're going to do. Yep.
So in relation to the reimagining project, it does both. It shows the money that we spent before money was made available through the annual plan, and it shows the money that we intend to spend for this financial year. The table I have in front of me doesn't go beyond this financial year.
Right, thank you. Right, so we'll go to the recommendations, and just kind of a high-level observation for today. Councillors are aware, but just for those online who might not be aware, normally the Corporate and Strategic Committee makes recommendations to the Regional Council, and we call that double debating. We've had some discussions about efficiency, and as this committee is a committee of the whole, there's some consideration being given in the interest of streamlining for the next trimester to change the mandate of Corporate and Strategic Committee and potentially combine that with the Risk and Audit Committee and make those decision-making committees. That personally has my wholehearted support. For today, given the urgency of this issue, the need to expedite the reimagining project, and that is contingent on having a fund to work through to model the questions that will come from the community. That is the proposal that we agree and resolve that this warrants an immediate decision, and we can do that within the powers of this committee, provided that the decision is unanimous. So, with that,
Just on that basis, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair,
Sure.
Because at the moment I can't support it because I haven't seen that detail, and I'd need to see that. We've got an issue around transparency for the spend. We've got an issue around what the budget was, what the expenditure was, and what it will look like. So on the face of it, we go from a $3 million allocation in the long-term plan that now looks like $4 million, and now we go for another $500,000 on top of that. So we've got just on the face of it today is a 70% increase in that budget allocation. No, Chris? Well, I need to see the numbers to make sure.
So the annual plan's been approved, and that $1 million was in that annual plan, and we've made a commitment to show you in the annual plan where that money sits, so we're happy to do that. I don't think we can do that in live time, but it certainly has been through a robust process. I think we've been clear to explain we've committed the funds for the total of that $4 million, and this ask is for 0.5 million out of an operating reserve to top up or to add to the 700K that was approved through the last annual plan through carbon credit sales. So at a high level, I think it's clear. We're also happy to provide you the detailed budgets of what we spent last year and what we spent this year in terms of those that response to the independent flood review and those priority projects, and we're happy to do that straight after this.
Could I ask you, Mr. Chair,
Sure.
Of yourself, the urgency for this, would it be, could we leave this lie on the table to the council meeting, which is when,
Into the month.
2 weeks? Is it that urgent that you need an answer now, that we couldn't receive that information and ratify the direction of travel in 2 weeks' time? Can that be answered, that question?
So what I would say, Councillor, is there is a risk. We are entering an invitation to the public to participate in a process. We want to take on their ideas and do some technical work with regards to their ideas. If there was a decision that this funding was not available, for example, we would, and that was in the future, we would have engaged members of the public to participate in a process that we had then limited down. So I think that's the urgency to me, that the project knows its full scope, it knows what the decision is. The public who might want to participate know what the process will be, and that funding has been made available. So I think there is some risk to push it down, and we also need to let our consultants know whether we want to be using them. Flood modelling is a very tight sector within the market, and we want to make sure we can signal to them as early as possible that we're after a certain amount of work.
okay, I Look, thank you for that. So I will just, I see councillor Foley has got his hand up, but before, and I'll go to him and I'll go to councillor Sears in a minute, but I just observe that from my own experience of Niwi projects, the rebuilding at Amahu, from a community's point of view, it was absolutely essential for there to be the capacity of this organisation to test their ideas. So in principle, the way that I view this is that this is an essential activity that we need to be able to fund in some way to some level. Okay. With that, we've got also note that this is the second time that this request has come to council, and this was stripped out. This was included in a previous paper at council on for carryovers, and it was rightly identified that it was not strictly a carryover and therefore should have been dealt with separately. So we've already, the clock is ticking for the community process, and so that's the basis on which there is a justifiable view if we are unanimously agreed that we can make a decision today. For all that, I've heard one reservation. I'm not sure whether Councillor Curtin's concerns can just be met by delaying, and so we could suspend, whatever the terminology is, this paper. We could go through the rest of the agenda and then come back to it, because we have the information in the room. So we have a bit of time, and we have a lunch break as well potentially. So that's an option. But I just want to hear from Councillor Foley and Councillor Sears, because what they have to say may change things.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I was just going to say I tend to endorse Councillor Curtin's comments. From my perspective, would like to see a breakdown of the two different schemes, and I'd like to think and made it clear my view of this from the start was the Upper Tuki scheme was never going to be a complicated process with regards to the scheme itself or the affordability of doing anything vastly new or different from what we already do. So I would like to see that breakdown of the two different schemes to ensure that we're not spending a lot of money on this on the Upper Tuki scheme. I can understand that Hiratonga is a lot different and will be a different case.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Can I just ask Chris, do we have that information today? Is that something?
So, look, I don't have a definitive split, but I would agree with Councillor Foley in that the Upper Tuki is different in that I think there's probably different community aspirations and there's less opportunity for what substantially different interventions. And so it would be, the split would be greatly in the favour of Hiratonga. Hiratonga is extremely complex. There's a lot of stakeholders involved and there'll be a lot of different ideas, and there's a lot of very high aspirations around what flood resilience should be. So they are very different projects, and the majority of this will be spent in the Hiratonga area.
Thank you. Councillor Sears.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I think there's sort of two pieces. Councillor Curtin's wanting to understand this 3 million, 24 to 26, but the 4 million comes because there was $1 million in 23, 24. So I think we've dealt with the 4 million, and I'm happy to accept that work's been spent or committed to scheme reviews. The 700,000 for the reimagining there was never a budget included within that to investigate further, because we assumed there would be money left over from the $4 million scheme review to do that. So the $500,000 actually isn't an extra ask. The project hasn't increased. It's simply that the budget from the $4 million there has been spent elsewhere. So I think we've got to be quite careful talking about cutting things down or being not needing to review, as Councillor Foley says. We've gone out very clearly to the community to say we will not tell you again how this will be done. We're actually going out to discuss with these stakeholder groups that we're opening the process for today. What do you know that we don't know? What can you tell us that you might want to think about? Where might we consider something that hasn't been done before? How can we look at things that might not be able to be done but could be done over 100 years because we're interested in 500-year or 1,000-year resilience for our region? To go out and say, actually, we're not going to put budget into that now, which we don't have because we've spent that on the scheme review, so we're not going to increase this project. To go out and say that now, or actually in Upper Tukituk we know what we're doing, is sort of negating the whole basis of what we were trying to do with the reimagining conversation. So I think Councillor Curtin would have a lot of confidence if he could see the $700,000 budget in terms of the engagement, what's spent so far, and why that 700,000 is now all spent and we're going to need extra. If you're telling us there's no room within the 700,000 to add to the new investigations. And I think we also need to continue to say to our community, we are going to listen to new ideas. There might be something we don't know about Upper Tukituk. I'm not going to pretend that we have all the answers there because it's actually negating everything we've said. So would understanding the $700,000 budget, what's been spent and what's coming, give you confidence? And are you comfortable that the 3 million here was 4 million from 23-24? Does that resolve issues for you so we could approve this today?
If I could comment. Look, I have no issue with where we're heading. What I'm saying is that we've come from a very murky environment in the whole process, and now it's time to be quite clear and transparent. It's $500,000, and no matter where people say the money's coming from, it's ratepayer money. It needs to be clear, it needs to be transparent, and the ordinary ratepayer in the street who gets their checkbook out and writes us checks needs to understand what we're doing. I have no trouble and fully endorse progressing the whole reimagining process, examining what options are available. It's crucial work. I'm not challenging that at all. All I'm seeking is some clarity around what we've spent on resilience in this whole process, what we're planning to spend, and why we need an extra $500,000, which you know, straight up is a 70% increase on the budgeted amount. I think the public deserve some sort of explanation of that.
I don't want to drag this on too long, but Councillor Foley, you got your hand up.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I just don't appreciate words being put in my mouth. And, you know, our ratepayers are struggling at the moment with the rates of paying at the moment. So I just endorse everything Councillor Curtin's saying about transparency here and what we're spending on what we're spending on.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, we've got a couple of options here. One is that we can put the motion and see whether we can pass it unanimously. Technically, I imagine that if that fails, then we treat it as a failed resolution.
Yes, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
Can I suggest that we let it lay on the table, have a look at the documentation, we get our next agenda item up, and then we'll come back to it. How does that sound?
Okay, no, I'm happy with that. We'll take the glass half full approach that we might be able to get this over the line today with a little bit more information sharing. So, okay, so I will do that.
So, Chair, can we be specific on the request, just so staff can make sure that we provide exactly the correct information?
What I'm going to do is we will have a slight recess. We'll have an early cuppa now and 10 minutes. And if Councillor Curtin, you can talk to the staff and make sure, just see what information they've got, what the gaps are. But I think Councillor Sears put it quite nicely that if we can have, you know, the more we can have a sense of broadly how the 700 and the 500 are being spent towards that resilience program, the better will be. With that said, that's not to suggest we don't have confidence that it is being well spent, but there could always be more information. All right, so 10-minute recess. Thank you.
Okay.
We would have better just shut up, actually, we haven't been helping at all, we just give them a hand. They say there's a couple of us put on.
Right, okay, look, and thank you to staff, welcome back, thank you to staff, and also thank you to councillors who've beavered away over that period of time to look at the information that we've had in the room. So staff, I think you're just going to quickly walk us through the additional information that we can table today.
Thank you, Chair. So in the break, I went through this in detail with Councillor Curtin, and so I'll just now take everyone through it at high level. So obviously on the 24-25 year, so no budget had been allocated for reimagining for that year. However, we saw the value in preparing, and if you recall, we brought lots of papers and workshops to council on designing that process, taking into account the recommendations of the independent flood review. So you can see some staff time there, and also we funded some consultancy out of our special projects budget within asset management. So that deals with 24-25. So that enabled us, positioned ourselves to be in the starting blocks, so to speak, on the 1st of July when that funding was available, and we weren't then spending time to launch the project. So you can see there in the 25-26 budget of interest is under the reimagining. You can see we have 700,000 of budget, and around 200,000 of that is project management. So it's an external consultant project manager. So we also have a comms and engagement support, and so that's because our comms and engagement team is a certain size that delivers business as usual, and when we have a significant project, we bring in extra support who connect into our comms and engagement team. So that's that 65K there. We have attendance and participation costs of 51,000 roughly there. The substantial contract is the comms and engagement for reimagining projects. So that contract is with Tonkin and Taylor. The actual contract is a bit less than that 376, but this is a summary report and there's other elements that sit under that 376. So that's the real horsepower of the people who are designing our engagement sessions, doing up all the material, keeping the records, collating all of the administrative tasks of checking who's there and venues and all of that sort of stuff. So there's quite an elaborate and a lot of engagements. So that's that contract. And so that's...
And just to be clear, that's completely different suite of activities compared to the modelling.
Totally. So
same provider.
So although it's the same company, it's different people. It's engagement experts, and the modelling is their technical team who just does the modelling. So one of the benefits of the one company, obviously that information flows more easily within that one company instead of having two. And we did competitively bid that contract. So it went to market. We received multiple prices and went through a selection process to ensure value for money. So that's where that 700K is sliced up into. And of course, that's the budget. And then we're quite early in the financial year. So these would be end of August numbers. And you can see there what we've spent to date on those various lines. And there's no next financial year because we're planning on completing this work this financial year, so it can then go into the long-term plan, infrastructure strategy and long-term plan process. Happy to answer any questions on.
Do you have any questions on that? No? Okay, right. Thank you very much. Look, we will move on and test the recommendations. So what we'll do is we'll split them up. We'll try 1 to 3 first. The idea that we'll test whether we can, whether there's urgency that will require unanimity. So if I can have a mover for 1 to 3, so we're going to receive and consider the staff report, agreed that decisions are not significant under the criteria contained in our significance and engagement policy, and agree on the urgency and to deal within delegated powers. Right. Councillor Ormsby? Seconding, okay. So, are there any speakers? No, no speakers, so all those in favour of 1 to 3, aye?
Aye.
Against? There are no against or abstentions, no? The motion's,
Sorry, against. Yep.
you're voting against, are you, Will? Okay, all right, okay, so in that case, we can pass, well, no, we can't agree, so we,
Motion. Sorry, excuse me,
Yep.
through you, Chair. Why does it require a unanimous decision?
because that's the terms of reference for
Okay,
this
thank
committee. Okay,
Okay, so the motion failed.
so,
Okay.
well, the motion kind of passed. I don't know, it's a weird thing. So effectively, we failed. So what I'd suggest is that I welcome an alternative resolution. We need to bring this paper back to the next available meeting of council. So I'm looking at a recommendation to direct that.
Yep.
And if there is anything else that we need, and it would probably just be a paper that just rounds out and just polishes the further information. That we've
Chair,
received.
excuse me, Councillor Foley doesn't have an alternative resolution to suggest?
Councillor Foley's welcome to put an alternative.
No, but I'd just like to see it go to the regional council meeting in 2 weeks. And I will communicate with Chris on further information between then and now.
Councillor Foley? Right, okay, so
I wonder, Mr Chairman, that we make a recommendation to refer the paper to the council meeting, the next council meeting consideration there. So we're actually recommending that we move it to that meeting.
okay. So we could just, as you said, normally do, which is just
A recommendation.
Yeah.
accept the paper and recommend. So we just simply accept the paper and recommend it back.
If I could just speak to a minute. I think in the circumstances, the usual protocol for a recommendation doesn't require if you like, a unanimous. So we could actually make a recommendation that we refer it to council, but we actually we approve subject to.
Yeah.
We could do that process, refer it, and then proceed from there. That wouldn't require a unanimous support.
Yes, great.
Yeah, so what we can do, we can still 1 and 2, and then an alternative 3, which is just refer the paper to next council meeting.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. Agree that we refer. So 3 would be agree that we refer that the council that the paper is referred to the next council meeting. Yep. So can I have a mover for that recommendation?
I'm happy to move.
That Ormsby and a seconder.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Curtin. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Right. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to skip forward slightly to our esteemed guests from HBRIC. Yes, Tom, you are esteemed. Don't look sideways. Welcome, Dan. But it was esteemed plural guests, so.
A couple of seconds to get set up.
Can I have the screen? Right, so, yeah, formally welcome Dan as the chair, the outgoing chair of HBRIC, long-serving outgoing chair, and equally long-serving and long-suffering Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Kia ora koutou. We're pleased today to present the quarterly report for HBRIC. You've got the report in your papers. It's also the final quarter of the year, so we propose today to show some additional slides, which you'll get a copy of afterwards, just recapping the year, and then we can have some questions. You'll note that the financials, year-end financials, aren't in your appendix. They're in the thick of the audit process, and they're going to be ready to distribute at the end of the month. By the 30th of September, the auditors should be done. But that's going, that's on track and going well, and it's much a lot of hard work from Tracy and the team. So I'm going to start off and then hand over to Tom for the heavy numbers. But you'll see on the slide pack may look familiar. We're trying to sort of stick to a similar format to the last meeting, just to try and get some consistency in the reporting going forward. So I just want to do a quick recap on where we began a bit over a year ago. Post-cyclone, or a year or two ago, Council had a look at its assets and had a look at HBRIC's performance and decided that the assets needed to be working a bit harder and the returns needed to be aligned with the future needs, particularly cash needs that the council were going to require for its plan. And obviously the cyclone did affect the port dividend for 1 year, so there were some very good reasons, and the council wisely got us to undertake a review. So the assets at that time are set out here, along with the returns that were coming, percentage of the returns that were coming from each pot, if you like. So we undertook a review, or have been, and the review's been ongoing. We sort of quickly determined that the forestry assets, while still an asset of the council of some value, we discounted them as investment assets. Then we had the managed funds, which were 167 million at the time. The port was valued at 272 million at the time. We've got the Napier leasehold assets, residential leasehold assets. That's a complex based in, so there's still work going on with that. And then we had, it's a very complicated contractual arrangement with ACC, basically, which is a multi-year and quite very complex. And then we've got the Wellington leasehold properties. So they were all reviewed, and out of that, we effectively came back and said, look, the core of this, the core of the portfolio of these three pots, which is the managed funds, the port shares, and the Wellington properties. Leading into the beginning of this last financial year that's just finished, we completed the RFP and moved all of the managed funds on HBRIC side and council side to Harbour Asset Management after an RFP, and we aligned those, the SIPO, or the investment strategy in those funds, to the council's revised SIPO. So effectively we told the fund managers we needed more money and we were prepared to take a bit more risk to get there, and so we've sort of gone from a conservative fund to a balanced fund. So at the beginning of this year that's just finished, we had, this is what we told you we were going to do. So we were looking for overall for a $20.6 million return for the year, which is that blue arrow there. And there's a bit of a, the graph sort of shows where we're expecting those returns to come from. 15 million of that 20 million was our undertaking to deliver cash to the council for its needs during the year. We planned on having a $4 million capital increase in the orange in that pie chart, and then we were hoping to be able to kick off the Dividend Resilience Fund with anything left over. Then we thought we might be able to grab million, another million to start that off. So the background of the Dividend Resilience Fund was that there's a desire to put together a reserve fund for to hopefully and build it up to a year's worth of port dividend, which we would normally get in case something happened at the port and we couldn't get the money 1 year. So this is so we're trying to get that started. And so I think this handing over to you, Tom.
Yeah, I'll pick up here. So in terms of, so that's what we hoped would happen at the start of the year. And so that's just a repeat of the previous slide. That was the budget that was set up. Again, the accounts are yet to be finalised, but, provisionally, what it looks like is obviously a significantly greater level of investment income, 28 million versus 20. And pleasingly, we've seen quite a strong increase in asset values across the asset classes, and I think that's quite well covered in Chris's report, his financial report coming up in terms of the impact on group the group's balance sheet. This is covered in the paper. This is just a different cut of what were the sources of those incomes. So roughly, 2/3 of that income of the cash dividend came via HBRIC, and a third from HBRC held assets. This just, and again, I won't cover the stuff that Chris and his team will probably talk to, but you've seen significant asset value uplifts, particularly in Napier Port. It has a big impact. It doesn't, you can't really access it. It sits on your balance sheet. It goes up, it breathes in and out, and it goes up and down, but not much that happens there. But I think pleasingly the managed funds, which started the year, I believe, below their capital protection watermarks, have actually ended the year above and also contributed to dividends, so that's been good too. So that's all good news. And so looking forward to next year, the analysts, financial analysts, the port's listed, so they get a lot of coverage, continuing to express confidence in the port. And so, we're budgeting 11 cents a share dividend, which is, that's fully imputed, isn't it? So, so that'll be, 12 million budgeted income from the port. The managed funds, look, they do sit above the capital protection watermark, so you do have some buffer in there, but only marginally, given the size of the fund. So, and everyone generally accepts that equities are quite at high valuations at the moment. So, we have to be cautious about, the ability to draw on managed funds to contribute to cash dividend and things like that. So that's why it's quite pleasing that the port prospects are looking pretty good. And just again, just in noting that, through the year, at the end of the financial year, there was the forgiveness, what effectively became the forgiveness of the loan between the two organisations, which has provided an ongoing, interest savings internally. So overall, early days, but the group investment portfolios perform well. Managed funds have performed particularly well in a tough year. I mean, there's been a lot of volatility in the markets this year, and so that's a sort of a in some respect a payback to your decision to effectively allow us to move to a single fund manager under a higher growth settings. And I think that also kind of helpfully enabled us to pay an advanced, for an advanced dividend to be paid and drawn on, towards the middle of the year, just to help smooth cash flow for council. And it's obviously we're all pleased to see the port bounce back, and pay a special one-off dividend as a bit of a reward for patience to investors. And so the word we all love when it comes to a good year in terms of discipline. And I just want to quickly just touch on the Dividend Resilience Fund. It was actually intended to be created as a part of the Napier Port IPO process. There was I think there may even be a reserve on the books or something like that, but we've just never been able to get the surplus funds into it. You've asked HBRIC to revisit this and set it up and it's agreed that HRIC will hold the reserve. And but at the same time, there was an additional cash dividend request as part of this year's, which made it kind of quite dicey as to whether we'd actually be able to establish that fund. So, you know, you have annually increasing cash dividend expectations. That requires, you know, a good performance from your non-port assets and good performance from your port dividends. As I said, you know, the value of the port doesn't really add to that equation. So we're thinking, subject to the finalisation of our accounts, that HRIC will probably be in a position to establish that fund this year and seed it between $3 and $5 million. So I think that will be a great outcome. And we're also, you know, on track budgeting next year. There should be sufficient surplus to then add to that the minimum. We're sort of targeting $2 million a year. So, so I think that's the. You got any final comments before we take any questions?
No, I think that's good.
Open for questions. Councillor McIntosh.
A bit of a statement for a start, Chair, and then a question, but I think it really highlights a good decision was made last year, was it, when we changed the criteria for investment, and we're really reaping the benefit of this now, albeit that this was a really good period, and getting back to the word discipline, we don't want to get too carried away on that. But I do think that as far as our overall operation is concerned, we underestimate the importance of this to our operation. I think if you look at the, you know, just the sheer increase in the value of the port in the period under consideration, it far outweighed our annual rates bill. And I know that's not a correct way to look at it, but it's an interesting way to look at it, and really rams home the potential importance of this to us, and in particular the decisions that were made last year. I just had a sort of actually a really incidental question, both in respect to the portfolio and everything, but Food East, so the devaluation of the building there, is that primarily related to the fact that there's still a bit of space to let in it?
Yes, yeah, that's it was valued at that cost, is my understanding at the beginning, it's taken that the market for renting space has been very soft, as we all know, but we expect that valuation to climb back up as it fills up, and we aren't at liberty to us today, but there is a significant tenant, you know, going to be announced in the next few weeks. So I was on the phone this morning too, and Tom's now resident in Food East on a hot desk, so we're very close to that, and it's going very well. I've got hosting a fermentation conference there tomorrow with 50 of the leading people from around New Zealand. Hosting a workshop. I attended a angel investor evening there a few weeks ago, and it was, you know, really well attended, and we had presentations with robotics and fermentation, and you know, I think that the board and management there and the team that's really quietly percolating away, and said to Tom, it's one of those projects which I think, I personally predict that success will have many fathers and mothers, and so I think eventually it'll be quite a celebrated asset, although it's, you know, it's not been the easiest road.
More questions?
Thank you,
Councillor
Chair. Thank you, Tom and Dan. I'm just referring to the Dividend Resilience Fund and information in our paper. Are we still on target for the 2 million, or no less than 2 million, to seed fund that at this October board meeting? Is that?
No, so to the contrary, the potential outcome is that we will try to do better than that, and we'll try and convert this year's gains into future resilience. So, and that's potentially and look, it's not in your paper, it's in the presentation, so apologies for that, yeah. So we've just been trying to finalise numbers, but that's the 3 to 5 million that, we'll put to the board to consider putting to that.
Yeah.
Okay, good news, thank you.
Councillor Sears.
Kia ora, thank you. Through you, Chair, thank you, great news. I'm not sure who the question is to exactly, but where will we have a discussion as council as to how much we want to put into that resilience fund, or where else we might spend it? Probably actually back to you, Chief Executive. How does that process happen now?
Can I take that question away and have a think about it?
I'll just add a flavour to it, is that just in consultation with council, that dividend resilience fund will sit in HBRIC. And so HBRIC will be the owner of that fund. We'll establish a policy and rules around that, which we can share. I think the question you're asking is, we can only put into it what's left available. So if there is a view, and you have set cash dividend requirements, but as we can see from time to time, we completely understand the pressures the organisation is under to spend resources. So that's a conversation. If the more you want, the less we can put into resilience fund. Hence the last word in those 3 slides.
Yeah.
That's going to be the theme of my chair's report in the annual in the AGM.
Through you, Chair, I think the point I'm making, I noticed there's 3 to 5 million. There's the resilient fund will be set up, like you say, we'll see the policy about that as that gets established. But there's always the back and forward conversation as to how large or small, not below our the policy that we set, how we might utilise that money. And I suppose those conversations come back through CNS or probably, or you'll come back to us. Just So there's a process for the discussion around these large, continuing large amounts that are over and above what we're asking for. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, and for my part, but in the same direction as Councillor McIntosh's questions, my inquiry is focused on Food East and understanding that. It's always been a little bit of a mystery, as is possibly the treatment of this in the consolidated group accounts, and seems to be. So on the one hand, we appear to be a 67% owner of a holding company for that, and that's valued. Well, the valuation of that hasn't changed much. It's about $3 odd million, gone up slightly against a devaluation of the asset of the building of 4 million, and a contingent liability of 12. So there's a bit of unpicking there to do, I think. So and probably for a future council, that would be something that we could do with more information on.
Yeah, we have a Crown, the limited partnership that owns the project, which we've got 67% of, has got a $12 million grant or loan from the Crown, which is basically forgiven over 6 years at $2 million a year, based on hitting some milestones. So I know the team have been meeting with the last couple of weeks, anticipation of getting the tickle for the first 2 million to be forgiven. So we're at the end of year one of, just finished the end of year one for the 6-year program.
Thank you. Councillor Ormsby.
Kia ora, Chair. Can I suggest, if there are no further questions, that we can move into acknowledgements for Dan?
Absolutely. Would you like
And I would like to end, please. Thank you.
So, Councillor Curtin, would you
Thank
like
you.
to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, Dan is coming to the end of his tenure as chair of HBRIC, and it's been a tumultuous time, I would suggest, Dan, but we are, from my perspective, having seen your activity and your leadership, chairmanship over that period of time, all I can say is a big thank you from both the council and the public of Hawke's Bay. So that quiet demeanour that you've seen around this table, meeting after meeting, is matched by a quiet demeanour around the HBRIC table, but it belies an effort that's gone in, which I think is extraordinary. I think the highlight, Dan, would have been the IPO process, where one Dan Druzianic held out for a much higher float price than was recommended. From memory, something like we were looking at sort of $2.40. Dan said, no, it's worth much more than that. So the consequence of that was probably around $50 million of additional funding that we got in the door as a direct result of Dan stamping his feet and saying, no, this is it. And so that the consequence of you've seen displayed today is an extraordinary result for the investments we've got both in the port. As a port director, that quiet determination is seen and observed around that board table. We are seeing results of that. So all in all, Dan, I think the council and our community can thank you for a tremendous effort over that period of time. Go well, and if we can continue to have good conversations and give us your sound advice, welcome to do that any time.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Anyone else want to add anything?
No, look, I would just endorse my colleagues, Dan, and on a lighter note, your timing is brilliant, mate.
Yeah, it's nice.
It's unfair of me to say that. I haven't been around for all of your time, but I've certainly enjoyed your presentations and the steady leadership that you provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. No, it is a good year to finish on. I can't take all the credit.
Yeah.
Can't take credit for that.
Yeah.
I'd just like to acknowledge all of the councillors present and past. It's been an honour to serve in the role, and also the team, Tracy and Susie, who's gone, and it's been quite a ride. Thank you a lot to Tom. Tom's a huge power and facilitator behind the scenes that sort of sits below the waterline a lot of the time, but he knows this organisation very well and knows how to get things done. What I would say is that sometimes, there's two things I'd like to say. One of them is that one of my favourite sayings is that as people and humans and organisations, we always overestimate what we can achieve in 5 years, but we also vastly underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years. And I think that's sort of what, this last 9 years or longer has been a little bit like that. We've come through the Ruataniwha episode, and then the port listing, and the cyclone, and viewing things on. Things are looking good. And also another, without wanting to take up too much of your time, another funny story was when I joined the HBRIC board. I think there was maybe 8 or 10 of us on the board, and 3 of us joined quite late, right at the end of the Ruataniwha project. And the council had absolutely had enough of HBRIC and all the results. And after about 3 meetings, Rex announced that we were all fired, and so it was all over. And so we thought, okay. So we all handed our resignations and went home. And then the next morning, I was in my office, and I get a call from reception saying, Rex is here. He needs to see you. Appointment, walked on. So I said, what's up? And he goes, he says, I've just been talking to James, the CEO, and I've made a big mistake because we've got to have one independent director on HBRIC. I mistakenly fired everyone. He says, I've just been round to Jim Scotland and asked him to come back on, and he told me to get stuffed. So now I'm here asking you. And I said, okay, it's sort of a half an invitation, but yeah. So sometimes. I guess the message there is don't be perturbed if you're second choice, because it can all work out. Thanks, everyone.
Fantastic, thanks, Dan. With that, I'm looking for mover and a seconder for the recommendation that we receive and note the quarterly report.
And I might just say a few words to Dan, and just thank you for all the hard mahi since 2017, even though you were sacked, you came back the next day. And you've been a steady pair of hands for us. There's been a lot achieved, which we've seen today, and we're in such a good position, so thank you so much for that. We have a small gift on behalf of the council and the councillors that we'd like to present to you as well, as a leaving gift. And for the mana that you've brought this council. Thank you.
I'll take that as a moving speech.
And that's a movie.
So, and Councillor Curtin, we'll come to you in a minute as a seconder.
Yeah.
Oh, like it's too big.
I'll loosen it.
Croatian here.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Councillor Curtin.
Look, thank you, Mr Chairman. Just in terms of commenting on the paper itself, yes, we've had what I suggest is a very solid result, and that's come at a time when we couldn't hope for better around this table, that's for sure. One of the comments I'd have to make, though, is that those percentages we see, those return on investments, are a bit of a beacon, and I think we're needing to look at the result achieved, particularly for the investment funds, and to be seeking that sort of result across the board. I think that's the next challenge for HBRIC, is to examine that portfolio in significant depths, and to look closely at how we might leverage the entire portfolio to achieve a result that is, if you like, benchmarked against, if you like, a worldwide portfolio. So I think that's the challenge for HBRIC going forward, and we ought to be expressing that perhaps in the next statement of intent for HBRIC, is that yes, we've done well, but we know we can do better. So I look forward to those conversations and to push this barrel a lot harder than we have in the past. Thank you, Mr Chair.
There are no other speakers. We'll go to a vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. Right. And apologies to the finance team, but we can now go to finance reports.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay. Kia ora, councillors. So what you've got in front of you now is the final quarterly report for the 2024-25 financial year. These are our initial draft numbers for the year. We're currently finalising the annual report with the auditors, and we will look to supply you next week with a copy of the annual report that you can have a look at and raise any questions on, noting that that will be subject to any audit adjustments that come through. The key things in this financial report for the quarter, we end up the year with an operating surplus of 35 million, slightly lower than budget, as we'd not received as many NIWI grants as we had originally planned, through the planning process taking longer than was originally forecast with limited information at that time. This is somewhat offset by some insurance proceeds that we keep pushing to get coming through the door, and a special dividend from HBRIC, which was used to repay an intercompany loan. Both the operating revenue and expenditure include around $35 million unbudgeted related to the Silk Task Force, whose work extended through the financial year 24-25 and is now wrapped up. A final point to note in the profit and loss is a large $72 million gain in other financial assets. This is mainly due to the increase in the share price of Napier Port. It started the year around $2.48 and ended the year around $3.22. So that equates to about an $80 million unrealised gain. I'll point to note, I just looked at the share price and it's gone down to $3.13, so that's a $10 million drop in that point in time. So it does impact quite a lot into there. And we've also had a reduction in the cash funds since the last year because of the money that has now been used for the Silk Task Force and passed out to the RRA. External borrowings actually decreased for the year by $12.6 million. Main impact of that is a $16.7 million intercompany loan with HBRIC that was repaid, and we only borrowed a net additional $4 million externally for our work during the year. Rates income for 25-26 is steadily coming in, and we obviously have a due date of the 20th of September next week. Outstanding rates for the 2024-25 financial year currently stand at about $1 million, which is actually lower than at the same point of time for the 23-24 year. That's a big result of bringing a lot of the debt collection in-house, and we've got a really good team working through that at the moment. On the Treasury side, Fitch reaffirmed the Council's AA rating in May, and obviously cash flow remains our biggest priority as we navigate the spend and receipt of grants and insurance related to Niue and the cyclone recovery. And I'll open up for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Chris. Go to questions. It's not a big stampede, so look, I'll lead off. One thing I noticed, I'm just referring to the balance sheet, if I can find it. A notable thing for me, current liabilities. So it seems that our current liabilities at $42 million for the end of the year, as compared to $108 million the previous year, have reduced quite substantially. So that must be of some reassurance to Fitch. So anyway, that just speaks to probably a slightly better structured balance sheet from a risk point of view.
It really speaks to what was happening at the end of last year with some pretty big amounts, especially around all the cyclone recovery and that, and the Silk Task Force that were being paid out at the end of that financial year. Okay. And funds that were held on behalf of other organisations.
Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ormsby.
Kia ora, thank you. I am asking about paragraph 28 and the remissions for utility charges to local authorities. Can you give us a bit more information about those remissions?
This is paragraph 28.
Yeah.
So in terms of these were the remissions, we have a rates remission and postponement policy that we approve every year as part of the annual plan. These are all the remissions that were applied for during the year. In regard to the local authorities, this was last year, this was the change that we had for utilities companies that had gone, underground utilities where they had no land value but they had a capital value. When we moved our general rate to the capital value, that increased their rate. So there was a 50% remission for them approved for the 1 year only.
That was the automatic one. It's not a special one that they applied for.
It was an automatic one and it was for 1 year only.
Thank you for that clarity. And sorry, secondly, the public transport of 99,000, same thing, it was from the revenue and finance policy changes.
Yes, yeah. So that was for people that were impacted by that change for 1 year only again.
Thank you.
Councillor McIntosh.
Thanks. Chris, paragraph 39, total borrowing. So at the end of the period, that was 117. Can you give us a steer as to what the latest view is on where that peaks, taking into account flood works and that sort of thing we've got coming up?
Yeah. Currently, we're looking at it peaking sort of the 27-28 financial year, around about $230 million. So still are only about 210, 220% of our total revenue. So well within our limits from the LGFA and in our policies into there. Obviously, with the NIWI program, we are getting closer to actually doing a lot of contracts and that, and getting reimbursements from NIWI. So that'll start firming up our cash flow and especially our longer range debt forecasting in there. One of the things that we're working on at the moment is a more detailed debt forecast that we can include in these reports that will go out for those several years. But at the moment, we have sufficient debt headroom for the activities that we've currently got approved to continue.
Right, well, I'll have another crack. Thank you, Chris. Just at para 48, paper notes that we have almost $500,000 carrying cost for the Crown funded, for the procrastinations of the Crown, arguably, or at least the delay between us spending money for the NIWI projects and receiving reimbursement. Can you provide any more information on that? Is there an expectation that we may be able to claim those costs?
No, it was quite clear in the original agreement with the Crown that those costs, the carrying costs, while we're waiting their reimbursement, wasn't covered by their stuff. This is one of the things that, as we get firm up the cash flows around the NIWI program, we will be looking to actually see, okay, what is the total impact of that? How does that fit in with the amount that we had approved in terms of our share of the 44 million? You know, if not all contingencies are used, that could actually form part of it. There's still quite a bit of work that will actually form probably into the next LTP to get a very clear picture of what the council impact of all of these will end up being.
Right, so where you say at the end of that, currently there's no confirmed funding sources, that means it's
down.
The future is uncertain.
The future is uncertain. You know, if we spent everything that we had previously approved, that would be an additional charge onto ratepayers in there. However, we're looking at all ways of making the minimum impact of that onto ratepayers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And just following on from that line of conversation, and I'm sort of looking at Nick in terms of suggesting that we go back to NEMA, particularly with the recovery work we did, and the government was very happy to fund silt and debris work, and if that means that some of our drains need to be cleared and we're not being reimbursed by NEMA for those particular pieces, that we have a conversation back to government about being reimbursed, at least since they have been happy to support us with silt and debris. I'm very grateful on behalf of the region, but that doesn't mean that we should be missed out of a lot of that work. Thank you, Nick.
Through you, Chair. Agreed. I'm about to send a letter to the Chief Executive of NEMA. So they have been very good to work with in terms of reimbursement of the work we've done around stop bank repairs. But we have reached a more of an impasse around the clearing of our drainage networks, particularly for silt and debris that's inside our drainage networks. So I'm about to write to NEMA to suggest that we have a CE to CE meeting to see if we can find resolution to that. The other outstanding matter with NEMA is probably around edge protection and the reinstatement of edge protection, and where we've put more modern edge protection in place than was previously there. So, for example, replacing trees with rope and rail, and there is a disagreement with NEMA around our ability to put back better, if you like. So, agree, Chair, or Council Chair and Committee Chair, that it's a live conversation with NEMA and one I've taken direct to the CE.
Look, just, Chris, if I may, one further question on borrowing costs. I noted in the table at para 10, the actual finance costs were 6.9 million against the budget of essentially 5.5, so 1.4 over. So am I right to understand that that means about 500,000 of that relates to the time delays and recoveries and the rest of it. So about $900,000 is basically core interest costs above budget.
Yep.
And so firstly, is that correct? And secondly, what are your expectations going forward for the cost of our borrowings?
That is correct. And the 900,000, that's sort of core above budget, the forecast budget. A lot of the expenditure, the borrowing for the Niue project was planned to be at the end of the year. We've had our 4 million that we've increased has been sort of throughout the year, but also we have seen higher interest rates coming through the year, which has impacted on our costs there. For next year's annual plan, we do have a significant increase in our budget for interest, which was always planned right back from the 3-year plan, that most of our borrowing would then be in play. Bigger parts of our borrowing would be in place, and we would need more interest costs there.
Right, are you able to speculate on what we're realising in terms of actual cost of borrowing? I note that there's the green loan proposal still in play, but we also know that the cost of funds is coming down.
It's one of the things that's being worked on as part of the annual plan, and I'll have a better. So there's a section in there that has our average cost of borrowing, so you'll see that soon.
Thank you. So, looking online, no further questions. We can move to the resolution, which I imagine is simply to see the paper. Do I have a... Let's just get there.
To move, Chair.
Yes, that we receive and note the financial report. So we've got Councillor Sears to move that. Councillor Ormsby to second. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you.
No. Any other speakers? No. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
So, organisational performance report. Sarah. Welcome.
Morena. I asked Chris to stay because there's financials in it, and is Desiree's not going to come up? Okay. I'll leave it to me. Anyway, Morena committee members, nice to see you. This item presents our quarterly organisation report, as you all know, and it covers the period from the 1st of April to the 30th of June. So this report is here to provide council and committee members with a comprehensive summary of all of our activities around the organisation, and particularly our corporate services, which often doesn't get presented in annual report in this way. So I'll take the report and the paper as read, but I think I'll just go through the points of interest because they kind of addressed what we talked about last time. And we do have our group managers on hand and other key staff if there's any specific questions needed as we go through it. So as our points of interest, our levels of service measures, I pulled them out of the report because they're presented in the annual report. There's no point having them in two places. And as Chris mentioned, we're very, very close to having the final document, which will be loaded into Stella for you to review well ahead of the 8th of October adoption meeting as well. But the levels of services, we've achieved around 76% of them this year. So there's a few that we haven't achieved, but they'll go through them in the annual report. Just around Lagoimas, there were three parts of, and I know this has been a thread of conversation, particularly from Councillor Sears around presenting them on our website as well. So we do have our official information requests up on our website, and we do that every quarter. So members of the public and councillors can go in and view it. It's on the page that's hashtag Lagoima. So you can actually read what requests are coming in. So individuals are anonymised, but requests from organisations and businesses are named. And on that same page, staff are now proactively publishing responses to requests that may be of public interest for openness and transparency. There are only 2 up there at the moment, but this will be added to as they come through. And from the next quarter, we're starting to run an aggregated report on the time spent on Lagoimas. Now, this will not be complete. It will take us quite a while to build up a picture, but just to let you know that we'll report it. And maybe the next report, it won't be a metric, but it will be included in the commentary, because there are some staff that included in their timesheets. They've all got different codes, and then some staff don't, but are starting to. So we'll build up that picture and bring it back to council so you can actually see what that might look like. Our staff numbers, I know that's of interest to our councillors as well. So we have a net increase of 4 staff because we had 12 staff join this quarter and 8 staff left. And actually looking at the recruitment of those roles, it was from the difficult to fill roles that have been vacant for some time. So particularly in science and ICT, they were successful in recruiting the right people. So that's why there's a small rise in the number of FTE. And just as a reminder, these are only permanent staff. We don't include fixed term or casual staff in that staff number. And in terms of the CEDAM reporting, there was a question, I think, from Councillor Ormsby, to have that better visibility of what's happening in CEDAM. And I note in the last joint committee meeting, the transformational dashboard was presented, which gives a very comprehensive overview of what's going on in that space. So hopefully that will answer that question of what's going on there and give councillors enough certainty that progress is being made. And I think I'll leave it there for questions, if there are any.
Councillor Sears.
Happy to start, Chair. Thank you, through you. Thank you. I love the Lagoima page. I think it's been set up really well, and I think it'll be useful information as you work through it to understand the time commitments, and we can see from those questions and the reports the value of it to community. I have a question, actually probably for the Chair of Civil Defence, if that's all right. Just acknowledging the transformation strategy, reading through that from CEDAM committee notes. I think it's a brilliant structure. I wish we'd seen that 3 years ago. I think we would have understood a little bit better how the system works. Have you discussed at committee how that dashboard will kind of integrate back to us? Obviously, most of it is one part's a third of it's ours. You have the 2 other sides, but sort of watching how the transformation strategy is progressing, and will that be a dashboard? How are we sort of keeping visibility on it, or are you expecting us to do that actually through the joint committee separately?
I think it can, thank you, Councillor Sears, it can be a bit of both because we all have access to the CEDAM Joint Committee's papers. Obviously, we live stream it, but we can also reflect back into our committee structure how the transformation strategy is tracking in terms of that dashboard. So it'd be great to have that visibility through our committee. So thinking about it next term, if we do change our committee structure, I think the Finance and Corporate Strategic Committee, however that looks, be able to receive these regular reports. Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Would you like my other question now?
Yeah, go for it. Oh, hang on, just before that, just as chair, I'll just reinforce, just welcome that. I think that discipline, even to actually go through the formal process of bringing that information and being able to interpret it, I think interrogate it, I mean,
Yeah.
is healthy and will be an improvement. Thank you. So,
Yeah.
so thanks for the offer.
Yeah, I recognise the accountability back to this council and the information brought here, so I think that's a great way to do it through the dashboard. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sears.
It's a question for Richard for integrated catchment management financials.
Would you like to join us at a microphone, Richard?
So the underspend in environmental science primarily reduced activity across nature-based solutions. So I thought it was an opportunity just to talk a little bit about that project and that funding and where it's got to, and now the underspend. Thank you.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa, ko Richard Wakeland, tōku ingoa. So this spend relates to the delay in the completion of that nature-based solutions in terms of its transferred from one year to the next, and so it's just that at that time, the underspend at that time. This project is connects into the reimagining flood resilience, so it's actually looking at a whole of catchment approach in terms of our future of flood resilience. So it is very much looking at all those different interventions. It will actually connect into some of the water security action plans. So there is a collab with water security, but actually also back into that reimagining flood resilience.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McIntosh.
Could you, a couple of questions, please. The first one is on page 8 of the report, yes, under incidents reported. And so there were, in the latest periods, 13 near misses. So near misses are when something didn't go wrong, but it was close to going wrong and it could have been really bad if it did. Can you give us, so that's a lot compared to the previous ones. Can you give us a bit, or a bit of a
I don't have the information.
I don't have it to hand either, but I can find it for you.
If you can give it to me afterwards, that'd be great. And the other one, please, is the customer satisfaction rating this quarter, the next page. I should have asked this question a lot of times, really, but I don't really understand that. We've got very little positive, small amount of negative, and then an overall score of 81. Can you tell me how that's figured out?
So you're talking about the second graph on that page? Yes. Right, okay. So these are it's like a mini survey at the bottom of an email. So if a customer's had an interaction with us by email, then they'll give some feedback that way as well. So it's very much reliant on customers coming back and filling it in. The low numbers of that reflect that, say, if there was 10 people who responded and 8 were positive, that would give 81%. So it's not proportionate to the number. Yeah.
Do you think it's how many people would have? Do you have a feel as to how many people responded?
So you can see if you look on the left-hand side, that's the number. The number of customers who've returned. So we're looking at around about 60 people in June, for example. For that quarter actually. Yeah. So this is a small number, and I don't know why that number's so low. Maybe the email interactions were a bit low. They probably spike around rates time as well.
Thank you.
Mr. Curtin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well done, Sarah. Another brilliant piece of work from people who do great work for us. My ADHD has kicked in, however. Just on page 12, you've got a reference here to carbon emissions under fleet and air travel. Given that we've sort of got a broader carbon emission, resilient sort of thing going on, is it possible to keep in mind that for our sort of standalone reference point in this report? I appreciate we've got a big publication for it, but in terms of presentation for someone that's looking for a quick look at this, is that possible?
So you're talking about our carbon emissions in that sort of shaded yellow box. We don't have the detail. We've got it in the annual report, but it wasn't ready in time for this report.
So it's just a timing
And if I do it next quarter, I could do it next quarter. So we've got it noted in the quarterly report, but yeah.
Okay. The other thing too, Mr. Chairman, if you go to those expenditure financial tables, we've got, go to, for example, page 15 will help. We've got expenditure, operating expenditure, capital expenditure, and then under funded by, and then we've got operating expenditure, capital expenditure. I'd suggest us deleting operating expenditure out of that second line, so it's not confusing me.
Okay.
Yep.
You can do that. Yeah.
Yep. No, we can do that.
Other questions? Can go to the recommendation, which is that we receive and note the organisational performance report for this period. I'd like to move that. Can I have a second? Councillor Sears, not as good as a wink. Thank you. Look, and just want to say that, well, two things actually. One, going back to this question about carbon footprints and our fleet and air travel, and page 12, it is pleasing to see a glimmer of a downward trend there, following the tremendous disruption to our own carbon footprint or the organisations caused by the response to Cyclone Gabriel, and also and further bearing in mind that embedded in those figures, and all of these figures are our whole NIWI program response. So there's a tremendous amount of arguably non-core effort and load and cost and carbon footprint embedded in that. So once we work through that, we should see another step change improvement. But it's great too, and as a shorthand for assessing our carbon footprint, it's not a bad one, because our air and land travel costs are kind of the backbone, I guess, along with operating this building, are probably the biggest parts of our carbon footprint. So this has been handy. It would be nice over time to have as Councillor Curtin's suggesting, a one-shot that tracks through that. I look forward to seeing that in the future. But look, the other thing I wanted to say was that I think, it was notable to me that there are far fewer yellow and red dots in this report than some of the previous quarterly reports that we received. And so it feels to me like a glimmer of normality and stability returning to the organisation. And I welcome that. I sincerely hope that the time between our last and our next Black Swan event is long, and the organisation has a chance to settle properly. The efficiency and effectiveness review also has that in mind. It's recognised the need to reset and actually create capacity within a surge capacity within the organisation, essentially. To get back to normal, I just want to compliment the Chief Executive and all the staff for the return to a more normal way of working, hopefully, or at least it might not feel like it at times for staff, but as a governor, I can see that we're going in the right direction in that way. So well done, everybody. Councillor Sears, anything to say? No?
Thank you.
Any other speakers?
Only just support your comments.
Thank you. Other speakers? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, team. And so we can blast through the 5-minute break. We can welcome Adrian, our Harbour Master, for an annual report.
Morning.
Good morning.
Before I start, I'll just pass out a couple of these here.
Thanks. Thank you.
So get seasick.
Soon be my husband's Christmas present.
Water.
His birthday next weekend.
Is your husband a boatie?
He is a boatie.
It's waterproof, so you can keep it on the boat as well. The pages are waterproof. Yeah.
Like it.
Yeah. So morning, everybody. So we'll be kind of going through the annual report for the Harbour Master's Office for the financial year 2024-25. I'll take the paper as read. Some of the key things that I want to just talk briefly about today, which is incredibly positive. The main thing is that we've had an overall reduction in the number of incidents, particularly recreational incidents in the last year. I'd like to think that is a testament to the engagement and education that we've been doing across the region. We've made a significant effort towards having community engagement and providing courses free of cost to our recreational water users. So boaties of all scopes, vessels of all sizes, anybody who's out on the water, we've tried to engage with them and have them come, do a course, learn how to be safe on the water, how to call for help if you get into trouble, etc. And that book that you guys have in your hands now was really critical in promulgating that information. So we wanted to create a region-specific boating guide that has all the important things: life jacket usage, communication, what you should and shouldn't be doing, areas that you should be going to, what you can and can't do in certain areas, just everything that is key for operating in our region, kind of like a one-stop shop for knowing what you need to have when you're operating in Hawke's Bay. And we teamed up with Coast Guard Boating Education to provide these courses across the region, and it was met with really, really, really good feedback. So I'm really happy and quite proud of that. That being said, there was an increase in the number of commercial incidents this year compared to last. So we had 17 commercial incidents compared to 10 last year, and we definitely want to get that down. By commercial incidents, I mean incidents involving commercial shipping. That could be Napier Port, that could be commercial fishing vessels out of the inner harbor, etc. Some of them were somewhat significant and could have been problematic had we not intervened. So we definitely need to focus on that next year, and that will be done using concentrated inspection campaigns for things like fuel usage, consumption, changing over of fuel in certain areas, etc., just to ensure that we don't have as many engine failures, steering gear failures, etc., especially in Napier Port and the shipping channel, because that can be quite catastrophic if something were to go awry. So in addition to that, we had a fair bit of change to our fees and charges schedule and how we monitor and manage vessels utilizing our commercial anchorages. We successfully implemented a fee for commercial vessels anchoring in Hawke's Bay, designated 10 areas, and that has been met with really, really good feedback from both the shipping companies and agents and Napier Port. It's just a bit more structured now. Ships know where to go, what they should be doing, and that was an overall net benefit for everybody in the region. And the major thing I'd like to highlight is that we had no fatalities last year. And at the end of the day, that's the most important bit, that we have people on the water who are able to go out, enjoy what they have in the region, and come back home safely to their families. So that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of, 0 fatalities linked to maritime safety last year. Going forward, one of the things that we'll be doing is we've developed our own in-house water safety course. I mentioned previously that we teamed up with Coast Guard Boating Education last year for the delivering of those courses, but we believe that we'll be able to deliver a 1-day course instead of the 2-day course that was done last year, because people find it hard to commit to both days over the weekend. So if we have a 1-day course, we can get greater buy-in and people coming in and saying, hey, we can sacrifice a day, come on a Saturday or a Sunday, learn about how to be safe. And I think that would be instrumental in improving the overall safety across the region. Those courses will be run basically throughout the entire region, from Mahia all the way down to Poranga-Haupuriri. That's been developed, and we'll be rolling that out. So those booklets will be given out to people participating in the courses as well. The other thing that was a pretty big milestone for us is the acquisition of on-water assets. So recently I was here with you guys, again, delivering a paper around satisfying the statutory responsibilities of having our own assets that we utilize for our on-water operations in council. The jet ski has been purchased and is on its way here. It will be here in a couple of days. It has passed the commercial survey to enter it into a certificate of fitness, so it can be used on the water for our operations, which is a really, really big milestone, because especially during the summer period, when you have lots of boats out, we can be out on the water engaging, disseminating information, collecting data, doing surveys, etc. So that's really, really important, and that will be a massive benefit for us this upcoming summer now. So really happy with the progress and the direction that things are going in, and we're definitely targeting having an increased level of engagement across the region, both in the commercial industry and the recreational sphere, to ensure that we have a greater regulatory presence and engagement for maritime safety. So, open up to any questions.
Whilst my colleagues are ruminating, I will
comments.
I'll lead off. So look, and I'll take the liberty of making some comments as well, because I can. So look, welcome Adrian again. It's apparent from what you've done and what you've come to talk to us about that you've brought fresh life to the role, and we've seen progress on many fronts. Some of which can be slightly confronting, for example, and slightly concerning for councillors, such as charging for services that haven't been chargeable before. So I'm interested to get some feedback for you on how that's going, because you mentioned that you've had good response to the parking, the boat parking thing that you arranged, the moorage. But we've been collecting some income from Napier City Council as well. So you've actually been accumulating some funds. So I'm curious to hear about that. And the other thing is, and you've talked about engagement and improved engagement, but also see that this prosecution. So I'd just like to hear from your own words about how you modulate that, the education versus the enforcement, so that, and how that's working in the community. Thank you.
All right. So I'll respond to the first bit first. So with regards to Napier City Council and the Anchorage levy that we implemented, the reality is that we've always looked after, to a certain extent, issues in the inner harbour. So when there's a problem, they call the regional council's harbour master's office, and that requires us to do a site visit, assess things, come up with a plan, etc., etc. So this is more of ensuring that we are remunerated in a way that is appropriate for the undertaking. So NCC fully agreed. They have no employees in their council that are marina managers. Usually with a commercial and recreational marina or inner harbour, such as the Ahuriri Inner Harbour, you would have a team there, or a set of people who look after things, moorings, mooring management, out on the water, checking things, etc. NCC don't have that in their organisation, and they rely heavily on us. So that was just simply coming to terms with how we would fund that function, really. With regards to the monitoring and management of anchoring for vessels, initially, vessels used to come to Hawke's Bay and they would anchor anywhere, because the anchorage areas were so vague that it wasn't prescriptive. And what that led to was a lot of confusion. And it also led to a whole lot of risk, because if something happens to a vessel at anchor, for example, they start dragging, weather conditions change, and the vessel starts drifting towards the coast or drifting towards another vessel, it becomes our responsibility to ensure that we don't have a vessel foundering, sinking, getting damaged, and oil ending up all over the beaches. So it's a pretty risky thing. We've seen vessels in Gisborne, for example, dragging anchor, heading towards the port, almost colliding, having to get rescued, etc. The monitoring of that is really important. So what was done is we set up 10 areas, 5 to the north of Napier Port and 5 to the east. And the ones up north are labeled A1 to A5, B1 to B5 along the east. When vessels come here, They anchor in a designated spot. So each spot is about 2 cables, so about 182 meters in radius, so 360-ish in diameter. They anchor there, and they submit a form online that says, hey, we've anchored in this position, and this is the time, etc. And we have management of that. We've also had to utilize a software known as an automatic identification system that gives us real-time management and viewing of that. So we can send them messages, we can do video playbacks, etc., ensuring that everything that's here, we know what's coming, we know where they are, we know what the capabilities are, and if something were to go wrong, we are able to basically dispatch vessels from the port, the tugboats, etc., to provide assistance. So the charge for that is $1 per meter per length overall of the boat per day or part of a day. And that charge essentially goes back into us paying for the monitoring software, etc. So hopefully that makes sense?
That's fine. And so there was some concern that, for example, that we might in some way jeopardise either our port operations or our cruise ship business through introducing these fees. Has there been, in your view, has it created any downside risk for Napier Port?
No, not at all. The port are actually quite happy because what was happening previously was that these vessels would anchor in random spots. And when it was time for the marine pilots to head out to bring the ship in, they would be 10 miles from the pilot station, 3 miles from the pilot station. And they would constantly contact the port on the VHF and go, hey, where can we anchor? So it became, and the port was a little bit frustrated in a way because they're saying that this isn't really our responsibility to be telling them because it opens up a certain level of risk, right? So if the port says to them, you anchor there, and something happens, for example, there's a risk involved. So the port are really, really happy with it. The marine manager, the chief operating officer, they've all been very happy with it and complimented the fact that we have this designated area now. Okay. And with regards to cruise ships are very rarely anchored. They're usually in and out. And we've had no pushback since the implementation of the fees from any shipping companies or agents. In fact, it's gone really, really well.
Thank you. So just to my second question, just around that balance, how you're balancing the education versus the enforcement.
So the one enforcement that we've taken recently was, some of you might have seen it in the news. There was a gentleman who crossed in front of a 280-meter container ship that was incoming, arriving to the port. He had 2 young children on board and crossed about 10 meters ahead of the ship. So it was extremely dangerous. Had something gone wrong, it would have been a case of 3 deaths, without a doubt. The marine pilot lost sight of the boat crossing ahead of the ship. The tugboats on the pilot boat went out to try and intercept him to get him to alter course to port and go around. He ignored them and continued to cross. So when we got the footage, we invited him for an interview. I had a chat with him, and I played the video to him and said, what was going on here? And he said, I don't know why I did that. And that was really, really dangerous. That was the definition of dangerous maritime activity. So our approach is never to lead with enforcement. It's always engage, educate, have a chat with people, and see how we can improve the general safety culture in the region. But that was a really, really dangerous case where the enforcement decision group decided that a prosecution was warranted. So basically, I present the case to EDG, the Enforcement Decision Group, and then they make a vote on what they think is appropriate.
Right, and can you just explain who is Enforcement Decision Group, please?
The Enforcement Decision Group is a team in compliance that kind of vote on what happens, and then that goes through a pretty strict process of signing off from the relevant managers, etc. So it's not a case of me just going, hey, I'll enforce this guy. No, there's a really long process to it.
Okay, so it's an internal council compliance body. Thank you. Councillor McIntosh.
The purchase of the boat, we've got some pretty good boat builders here. Is it the sort of thing that you imagine you can source locally?
So for the purchase of the boat builders here are, you're referring to
or senator or?
Yeah, so we're gonna go through the procurement process with the team and figure out what is the best bang for the buck, let's say. So we're not limiting ourselves to any particular boat builder. We'll go through the
Through
procurement
your chair,
process.
we'll identify, we are going to select procurement process. We will have preferred tenderers that we will identify. Of those, there are going to be some local, absolutely, but they will be, they need to be competitive.
Yep.
Right, thank you. Councillor Ormsby.
Kia ora, Chair. It's great to see that we're now not the only harbour master in the country with our own vessel. So congrats, we have definitely upgraded ourselves. And you should be really proud with the work that you've done, especially with this booklet, which we're all enjoying reading actually and learning quite a bit. Hey, and just in terms of casualties, do you sort of rank them in terms of severity, obviously death being the worst, to like near misses, to injuries, to what sort of spectrum of fatalities or to casualties do you look at?
Yeah, so when we have incidents being reported through the incident reporting system on our webpage, that comes into us and it basically gets triaged. So we have accidents, incidents, near misses, and then in accidents, you also have obviously casualties. So that is the triage process of identifying what is severe and what isn't. That is heavily reflected on how we liaise also with Maritime New Zealand, because we have to submit those reports to the national regulator, i.e. Maritime New Zealand, and that goes into their annual statistics for their production of recreational maritime incidents and fatalities, etc. So this year across New Zealand there was 17, none here, fortunately, but basically, yes, we do triage and we do have a way of determining what is more severe and other things where the potential was quite high. For example, the issue with the vessel off in Waipatiki, where the 6 guys were on board, didn't have any life jackets. Only one guy had his waterproof cell phone pouch and he was able to call for help. That was actually quite a significant one. And we managed to get all those guys on one of the courses as well to learn about safety. So we triage it based on the severity of things, yeah.
Through your chair, in terms of, and what the Harbour Master's Office does is then looks at what types of incidents, what types of accidents are we having in Hawke's Bay, and what is our response to that. And so for many, many years, the Harbour Master's Office ran a campaign on water safety for children. Now, across the country, there's a whole lot of programs that are done on water safety for children, and in fact, we were doubling up. We've worked with Maritime New Zealand and changed the offering, and you've seen that today in terms of the training courses that we're now providing, because actually that's directly related to the incidents that we are seeing in Hawke's Bay. And how do we, coming back to the chair's question about how do we approach our enforcement, well, firstly, it's getting education out there. So we're trying to stop those incidents from happening by educating at the first point, and that is exactly why we've changed the offering that we are providing to the region.
Thank you.
If there are,
Just want
yep, Councillor
just
Curtin.
the Ocean Adventures commentary back to us. Have we responded to their letter of concern?
Through your chair, yes, I have responded.
Thank you.
Right, okay, so I think we can move on to the motion that we receive and note Harbour Master's annual report. Do I have a mover?
Give it a move.
Councillor Ormsby, Councillor McIntosh, the second. Would you like to speak to that?
No, thank you. Just great work.
Thank you.
No, if there are no other speakers, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Right, so we've now arrived at
Take it home.
agenda item 10, payroll remediation project in 25-26 funding. And as a recommendation that we move into public excluded to hear this paper. The grounds for that around the prevention of disclosure of legally privileged information and not prejudicing commercial negotiations. Can I have a mover and a seconder for that recommendation, please? Okay, Councillor McIntosh and Councillor Lambert, I think I saw a finger there.
Or did too.
All right, okay, we'll take those two. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Carried, thank you. Right, so we move into public excluded. Thank you. you.
Zane, Councillor Harding, just before we go into break,
I don't know about unrewarded. That's not my job, but certainly when the plaudits are being handed out, sometimes we kind of forget the support that we get as chairs and as councillors from the governance team. So I thought that I'd like to thank X on behalf of the team for all that you've done for me and for us over this last couple of years at least.
Right. Thank you, Chair. You've been an excellent chair. I've really enjoyed your committees. Brought real clarity to a lot of the papers for me as well, so I'm grateful for that. I think it can be a huge loss to this council. I don't know about kicking the sign down. I think he should have been putting signs up, Laura. So I think that's a real disappointment for us, so it'd be a real loss to the table.
Thank you.
Huge mihi. Thank you, Zane. Love your style. You will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Zane, just on behalf of the organisation and the staff, can I just say a huge thank you to you and a huge mihi to you for chairing this committee, and you've probably chaired a committee through some pretty turbulent times, particularly as we've looked forward to future strategy, but also had to navigate the financial challenges that we've had over the last 3 years, and your knowledge of that area of the business has been invaluable. So just a huge thank you to you for all the work you've done to support the organisation by chairing this committee, as well as all the other things you've done over the last 3 years.
Yeah, look, and in response, I'd just say thank you, but that's a little bit too kind because the chair's only as good as the staff and the work that comes before the committee, and both Susie and Pip have been outstanding in that, and all the staff behind them. So thank you. And to you with the closing, Laura.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, kia ora koutou. Kia tai, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai tō tātou ara ki ai karaiti me te aroha o te atua me te pipi ngā taitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake. Amene. See you then. I'm going to put a stick in your bikes then. Right.
See you on your tractor.
You will. Bye.
So, stick in the
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Well done.